I'm Carol Bacak-Egbo, historian for Oakland County Parks. Join me now for an episode of History in Our Parks. Who was Henry Jenkins? A two-park mystery. On the border of our new Holly Oaks ORV Park is a small historic cemetery, Hadley Cemetery. That cemetery also happens to be right across Dixie Highway from Groveland Oaks County Park. It's a small, private cemetery. It's lovingly cared for by the Hadley Cemetery Association. That association has the most incredible set of cemetery records I have ever encountered. As part of my community outreach, I've been helping the association archive some of those records. In doing so, I located the burial record of Henry Jenkins. He died June 7, 1877. What I found interesting was that Henry Jenkins was African American. He's labeled here as, quote, colored, unquote, a common label of the time. Where there should have been a burial plot number were only the letters PF. That stood for Potter's Field. A Potter's Field was a small section of a cemetery set aside. It was designed for a community to bury people they labeled as unknown, unclaimed, indigent, people without families. The Potter's Field was clearly labeled on the Hadley Cemetery map. Today it's just an empty plot near the front of the cemetery. That's where Henry Jenkins was buried. I needed to know more about Henry Jenkins. I located him in the 1870 Groveland Township census. He was a farm laborer working on the farm of George Leland. A search through newspaper records, Oakland County historical records, revealed nothing more about Henry Jenkins. Turn to the 1870 census. What clues did I have? He was born in Alabama. Based on his age at death, he would have been born around 1850. African American, born in 1850 in Alabama. I was convinced Henry Jenkins had probably been enslaved. That took me to the 1850 Alabama census, where I realized that less than 1% of the African Americans in Alabama in that year were free. Again, I was convinced Henry Jenkins must have been enslaved. I went back. What else did I have as a clue? Jenkins, his last name. It was highly common that enslaved people were forced to take the last name of the slaveholder who owned them. That took me to a list of Alabama slaveholders of 1860. I went county by county looking for a Jenkins plantation. There was only one in Wilcox County, T.G. Jenkins, who owned 39 slaves. That took me to the 1860 slave schedule, where slaveholders were listed with the enslaved people they owned. I found Thomas Jenkins, but notice, enslaved people were nameless, listed only by their gender and their age. This showed me, however, that Thomas Jenkins owned 3 10-year-old males. These young boys would have been born around 1850. I am convinced that one of them was Henry Jenkins. I believe that Henry Jenkins was born and grew up in Wilcox County on the Jenkins plantation. It's a long way from Wilcox, Alabama to Groveland Township. I believe that Henry Jenkins made that journey after the Civil War when he was finally free. But why Groveland Township? What brought him there? He was the only African American in Groveland Township at that time, according to census records. How was he treated? Did he feel safe? What caused the death of Henry Jenkins? So many questions, but so few clues. Sadly, many African Americans who came to Oakland County in the mid to 1800s are like Henry Jenkins. Their stories were unrecorded, thought to be unimportant. That's why it's so important for me to continue to try and unravel the story of Henry Jenkins.